Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for another Varjo webinar. It's great to have everybody on the call. Today, we're going to be learning about how airmen are using XR and VR technology to just deploy and scale training solutions for air maintainers. We have a ton of content to get through, so I'm going to be really brief here. For those of you who don't know Varjo, we are a Finnish VR and XR hardware company. We build the best-in-class, highest performance XR and VR headsets, including having the highest resolution and the highest performing mixed reality video see-through. One thing, we get a ton of engagement on these calls, so we'd love to make ample use of the Q&A tool. Please feel free to post any questions, and we'll do our best to get to them either in the chat or live, or given how much we're going to go through today, we might even do it after via email. And then, without further ado, let me introduce who I'm here with today. I have the distinct pleasure of being here with the Unreal Engine Simulation Business Director, Sebastian Lozé, on behalf of Epic Games. Chris Verrett, the CTO and co-founder of HTX Labs, who has built some of the training software that we'll be talking about today that uses Unreal. And then Sergeant Kyle Ingram of the US Air Force, who has been deploying this training solution that we'll be talking about on the ground. And I, of course, am Jeff Bund, Head of Software Partnerships in North America for Varjo Technologies. I'd like to pass it over to Sebastian, who can talk a little bit about the overall context of what's been going on in training and simulation, and also provide some of the information about the kernel building block that's been used of Unreal Engine to build this training.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this intro, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with our friends from HTX Labs and Varjo's team. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share our thoughts with you and with Tech Sergeant Kyle Ingram here. We're often asked to share our thoughts regarding the simulation trends in the aerospace domain. And while there would be a lot of good stories to share about our journey, and it could consume a great deal of our time today, I summarized this feedback from the community in 4 major arcs here. We'll talk about pipeline evolution, talk about photorealism, the accuracy demand for simulators, and the deployability needs. Unreal Engine being a development platform, we are not building simulation solution ourselves. We believe the simulation ecosystem is super well empowered with subject matter experts who are building these solutions, and they are very usually talking to us and sharing their needs. So that's where we aggregated all these trends. So first, let's talk about pipeline evolution. As you when you think about pipelines in the simulation domain, there are some key bits of the ecosystem around Unreal Engine that comes to mind. The 3D tiles integration, the ArcGIS integration, as well as CDB plugin, among others. It's easy also to establish a natural link with the work done by our Epic Games colleague in the photogrammetry field. So the photogrammetry pipeline optimizations of Quixel and reality capture, they are creating a simple way to inject content into your simulation applications by leveraging new techniques from aerial captured videos to handheld device photography. And what's coming next is actually more exciting than, as we start to see AI solutions augmenting captured geographic data, such as the one developed by Black Shark. And exciting and essential too is the work done by the community to build large open world standards like the 3D tile Next, which will provide attribution to geometry. It's allowing simulation developers to interact more intelligently with their environment. Now let's talk a little bit about photorealism. Some of our audience members may have missed the release announcement of UE5, the Unreal Engine 5, which happened last week. Photorealism when you look at the word exactly, and that's me, the French guy, explaining words in English. I mean, how crazy is it today? It's all about light and how light is traveling the same way in the real-time 3D than in real life. And that's what we're focusing on here, right? Light is behaving more like in the real world. We called it lumen. It's part of our most recent release. There's no need for faking the light anymore, right? Either outdoor, inside buildings, or anywhere, basically. So there are enough work happening these days in the global digital community to ensure that we can collectively leverage in training the commercially available technologies that are used in games or in movies. Now, a classic misconception about game engine is to believe that they're only creating beautiful images. And it's often linked to the fact that they are scene graphs. The images that are produced are the emerging part of the iceberg. That's what we see. That's what we can consume with our eyes and understand. But I would mention two examples here that are really linked to how accuracy is now taking a full part of the reflection as we build the next generation of these game engines, right? There are some physics capabilities like chaos, which is highly customizable, not related to any specific graphics card, lightweight physics simulation solution available at the core of the game engine, which is built in from the ground up to meet the needs of next generation simulation applications. As well, we're focusing on large world coordinates to introduce the support for double precision data variant in Unreal Engine 5, which is extensively changing the way you can bring fidelity to the simulation applications that you're building without having to jump through hoops when you're developing. So our goal here is really to simplify the process for creators. Once your 3D environment is constructed, you will need to focus in all the entities that are populating your environment and how they behave with each other, right? So for a training simulation, the accurate modeling of object composition, their structural articulations, their flight dynamics is crucial to ensure that you're not injecting negative training and that you're building an actual simulator and not an animator or video game. If we talk about deployability for a second here, traditionally simulators have been very defined and locked designed with limit upgrade paths. I mean, when I say traditionally, it's all times, right? Very monolithic solutions. But with commercially available XR equipment and other readily available hardware, users have a lot more options for developing new training systems and improving existing solutions. The ability to output to many types of display devices, from enormous domes to VR headsets, AR glasses, or even mobile devices, is really changing the way we can deploy and ensure that we can create once and deploy many. And Chris will talk way more than I can about this paradigm in what they're developing with IMPACT. We believe with Varjo that open standards and the rise of OpenXR is bringing a next level of standardization between devices and game engines, removing the burden to adapt to any single set of hardware, drivers, and interfaces, while applications are being developed. So, in conclusion of this very short introduction, and before we hear about those who are using Unreal Engine to create the right experience for trainees, I would like to conclude here by saying that there are no environments like simulation which are as stimulating for us at EPIC to ensure that we reconcile real-time, accuracy, and photorealism. So thank you very much for your time today. Now let's hear more from HTX Labs, who is taking Unreal Engine as a platform on which they are building a very open and flexible training solution. So over to you, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sebastian. Appreciate it. And good morning, or in some cases, good afternoon to folks here. Really excited about this one. It's my pleasure to be on this webinar with Varjo and Epic. and with TSgt Ingram, who we're going to be hearing from in a moment. Again, my name is Chris Ferret, and I'm the CTO at HTX Labs. When we started the company about 5.5 years ago, what we set out to do was disrupt horrible ways to train. You think about passive learning, PowerPoint presentations. We're watching one right now, although we'll have some videos here coming up. It's not what the next generation wants or expects, not even what the current generation wants or expects. And so what we wanted to do is really try to align that with the way people actually learn. You think about active learning, learning by doing, learning through experiences is really what we're after. And so with the increasing rise of immersive technology and its affordability and availability, which has been, certainly there's been driven by the consumer market in some cases, one of the things we wanted to do was make that ready for the enterprise, whether the enterprise is the US Air Force or corporate America, and build a solution on top of best-in-class technology, both software and hardware, that would make it easier for customers to adopt XR training. And so on the next slide, what you'll see is that we have built our platform, which is called IMPACT, on best-in-class technology, software and hardware. So with Epic Games Unreal Engine, what that has allowed us to do is build the most high fidelity, most accurate environments, which Sebastian spoke about, and also to do that more rapidly. And that's getting easier every day. But building on that solid foundation that is Unreal Engine has been a huge advantage for us. In addition, Unreal gives us the ability it gives us a lot more control over the environments and the models that we're creating. And we look at VR training or XR training, the optimization of those models and those environments is key. But then there's deployability. Sebastian also talked about this as well. So as a company, as a technology company, we're trying to support and follow standards wherever we can. Unreal Engine makes that even easier for us. So things like OpenXR, being able to plug right into that makes it very easy for us to take the immersive learning and the training that comes out of IMPACT and make that available on best-in-class headsets, XR headsets like Varjo headsets. And not just that, but future-proof that for our customers. So as Varjo comes out with whatever comes after the XR3, the training is still going to work. But it also allows us to support other types of devices as well. Hopefully someday everybody will have a Varjo, but there's tablets, right? And people want to be able to train on what they have. So that's the train anytime, anywhere on any device that you see here. We could spend the rest of the webinar on this slide, and I promise I'm not going to. I just want to touch on it briefly. What you see here are the 5 verticals that make up IMPACT, which is share, develop, create, learn, and measure. And if you take anything away from this slide, because there's a lot that we could unpack, it's that we're not providing the training to customers. We're giving them the tools and the foundation upon which they can create, scale, and sustain their own immersive learning programs. And we definitely believe that this is the right approach. We're going to dig into this more and hear from TSgt Ingram here in a moment and how this is being operationalized within the United States Air Force. But I'll use everybody's familiar with the fishing pole analogy. I can give you a fish, or I can give you a fishing pole and teach you how to fish. That's what we've done with IMPACT, the latter. So we've provided, I'll work briefly left to right. With the share, we've provided a digital asset repository that allows us and our customers to house the building blocks, usually 3D models, but not always, but 3D models that make up immersive training. And then with Develop, that is a low-code content creation tool built on Unreal that allows us and others within the Air Force and outside the Air Force to rapidly create meaningful immersive learning environments. Think of them as digital classrooms, right? So we bake intelligence into those classrooms, and you'll see more about this in a couple slides about how you can do self-authoring, no-code content creation, which is that middle vertical, create. So I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to maintenance training on a C-130 aircraft. Sergeant Ingram is. So if I can give him or his contemporaries a a tool that allows them to immerse themselves in that environment and capture their expertise, and then codify that into a lesson without them having to write any code, and then deploy that lesson over to the learn vertical. Now students can access that anytime, anywhere, on any device. That's powerful, because those instructors and those subject matter experts are able to scale themselves. They're able to create and sustain those lessons in that curriculum without having to go out back to a vendor. And then the last piece, probably the most important of all of this, is that if we're not capturing the data, the usage analytics, the performance analytics, so you can really track trends over time, quantify the value, the efficacy of the learning, and then integrate that with the broader learning ecosystem, so learning management systems, learning record stores, analytics engines, then we believe you've missed the mark. So this is holistically what Impact is, which we've built on Unreal and we're able to deploy to best-in-class headsets like Varjo. Impact it's not Air Force specific. It's not any one industry specific. Definitely what we're talking about today is how the Air Force is using it. And you see a few different use cases here where Impact is already operationalized and being used within the Air Force. So anything from pilot training to maintenance training to contingency response training, and many things in between across a lot of different Air Force bases. Impact is something that can adapt to whatever the subject matter or the curriculum is. But once again, it's that fishing pole analogy. We provide that platform and that foundation to customers so they can do this themselves. And so that really takes us to the use case that we're going to spend really the bulk of the remainder of the webinar on. Over a couple of years ago, probably about 2.5 years ago, we became involved with an initiative called Maintenance Next within the US Air Force. And Maintenance Next really manifested itself into what we see happening at Shepherd Air Force Base right now. But in the beginnings, the goal was to take decades-old curriculum, it's been taught generally the same way for many, many, many years, and transform that into a delivery model that was more in tune with what incoming airmen want, expect, and need to be successful. So more immersive, more experiential, more adaptive, and frankly, more fun. Something that you gamify it and they feel like they're playing a game, but they're actually learning, and they're excited to learn as opposed to sitting in a class or going through a textbook. But the last piece that, once again, can't kind of beat this in enough is not just provide that, but do it in a way where they can take it and run with it. So that's the question we see on the slide here is how can airmen efficiently create, scale, and sustain? Not vendors, not XR vendors, but how can the customer do that themselves? And not just for one career field and one particular type of aircraft, but we look across the US Air Force, there are a ton of career fields and different use cases that this needs to ultimately scale to. And we'll talk more about how we're starting to see that happen. So this is where it's really my distinct pleasure to introduce Tech Sergeant Kyle Ingram, who is with us here today. And we've had the privilege to work with Sergeant Ingram over, it's over a couple of years now. One of the things, Sergeant Ingram, that I'd love to maybe start with here and pass it over to you is, there's an origin story from how Sergeant Ingram got involved in this. And I love it. I think it's a powerful origin story because it speaks to anytime there is disruptive technology, there can be bumps and hurdles. There usually are. And it doesn't usually go smoothly when you try to take something that's been done a certain way for a long time and then introduce a new way to deliver the model. So Sergeant Ingram, if you wouldn't mind, for our audience, maybe just speaking a bit on that origin story and how you got started with this, I think that'd be a great way to set up the next several slides.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And thanks everybody for being here, as well as the team that's putting this webinar on. Just as Chris from HTX was just mentioning, I'm in the Air Force. I develop courses right now for students to be taught from. My origin story on how I got involved is quite expansive. There's a whole lot going into it. But first off, back in 2020 when this whole thing started, I was not really a believer in the VR stuff. I'm a crew chief. I like my hands to get dirty. I want to go out and show the students how to do these wheel and tire changes, or, getting dirty with hydraulic fluid and stuff like that. It's how we've always taught mechanics for generations. Is we just go over the material, we take them out, and we do our job. But as it progressed, and as I came onto this team, I was kind of picked and put into this team, and where I didn't believe that the VR would have a huge benefit, or the XR would have a huge benefit, I was absolutely wrong. I was absolutely wrong. And this is where it's so strong, because from me, who I'm not very technologically advanced, I'm a crew chief, I wanted to just learn on my actual aircraft and just do the job. But when the first time I put that headset on and I was looking through, and I could see my C-130 right there in front of me, or my C-5, or whatever aircraft I needed, I could see it right there in front of me, sitting in my room, in my office, where a C-130 could not fit, but I could see it right there in front of me. I was able to walk around that C-130, do those tasks that I wanted to be able to do on the flight line, but I was in my office. I'm teaching my students in a classroom, my however many students I have in that class. But being able to take that headset and put it on a student and say, hey, let's go learn the C-130 before you actually go out to the flight line, and you see this C-130 or whatever other aircraft you may have, the benefits are just endless. The students, they get to see it, they get to identify the locations of components, they can see exactly the size of those components, what color of those components. If it's behind a panel, they get to see that prior to actually having to go out to the aircraft and going out there and me having to show them how to do the process. They get to do that process right there. So it's taking away these, and Chris really mentioned it here. We're learning on pieces of paper and PowerPoints still. And it's taking away that experiential learning that we could be having, and all these superpowers and everything that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit with a few more slides down. It's incredible to see these students progress through there. And once I saw this C-130 in front of me while I was in my office, it changed my entire outlook of the VR, the XR, MR, AR, all of the above. It changed my entire outlook, and I became a believer. And ever since then, I have tried to learn as much as possible. It's fun. It's fun to be sitting in my chair, and I get to work on my C-130 right here. I get to do all my different tasks that I'm supposed to be qualified on as a 5 level, as a 7 level. And I get to do all of this right there in my office. I don't have to call and have an aircraft put out of service for a second so I can take my class out there. I can do it right there in front of them. So moving on, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through these little points on the slide, and then I'm going to pass it back to Chris. So modernizing these initial skills, this is, every mechanic has to go through initial skill first. We have to know about safety, and our situational awareness has to be high, because these things are dangerous. So this allows us to put the students into those areas where it's really dangerous, and where they get to see the aircraft, and safety is the biggest thing. And they get to do this thing, and I'll talk about this later, but they get to fail safely. It's not hurting the student to be able to fail inside this VR. They get to see that, they get to feel and see how it is to fail, so they're aware of what happens if something happens. But it allows them to do it, so now they know what not to do. So it's modernizing everything for us, and then translating it into the XR. The XR is just, I don't even really know how to explain it, other than if you're in your office right now and you can put a C-130 in your office, but then you can also see your office. Or as we're using it, we have an empty hangar, and we can walk out to that hangar and put the C-130 inside our empty hangar, and I can see everything around the hangar. I can see the C-130 there, and I can see my students, and my students can see the C-130 through their XR headsets as well. So I'm able to walk around, see my students, help them throughout the process, going through this whole C-130, familiarization basically. So the integration and deployment, we're working towards it right now. We're working with the Unreal team. We're working with the Varjo team. We're working with the HTX team in developing all of this content, trying to move forward as fast as possible, because we're trying to make sure that we get the perfect product. And this is definitely hitting that nail on the head. The deployment, we're using, our tablets, we're using little headsets. Varjo has been a huge help, and I can honestly speak to how amazing those headsets are. They make it look real life. So you really should try those out if you have not. Sustainment, we're actually going to keep this in the Air Force. So the Air Force is going to take this over. It's going to be something that we don't have to continuously look at sustainment over and over because the Air Force itself is going to own this. The hardware and infrastructure, obviously, we're going with our Surface Pro 7s. We're going to be giving every student a tablet and a headset for inside the classroom, so they can see the headsets. They can use the headsets in the classroom, but then they can take their tablets back to their rooms in their dorms, and they can still use the training because this stuff is multimodal. You can use it. It's hardware agnostic. You can use it with this tablet. You can use it with your phone. You can use it with a headset. The acceptance and adoption, so it's easy and difficult at the same time, mainly because students, they love this stuff. I tell a student they're going to be in VR and they get excited. And it's kind of difficult to get them out of it because they want to be in this. They want to train. They want to learn this stuff. But my instructors, like me, it's harder to get us on it because we grew up a different way. And these students, they've had this stuff forever. So their acceptance is very easy, where my instructors, I have to kind of teach them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Chris so we can continue on with this.
Yeah, thanks, Sergeant Ingram. You were talking about the sustainment piece, which is something that I think a lot of folks don't think about because they're more focused on the excitement of getting involved in immersive learning, and it's fun and it's innovative and that's awesome. But then how is that going to be sustained for the long term? And so I think that one of the key aspects of this is self-authoring or no-code content authoring, which in the video here, you see some examples of that as it loops through. Self-authoring tools allow subject matter experts to capture their expertise and really scale themselves, right? And that was one of my takeaways after being visiting Shepherd one of the first times, is seeing how much knowledge some of those instructors have that have been doing this for years and years, and what happens when they leave the building. Wouldn't it be nice if you could capture some of that and then make it so not just the students that are around them have access to it, but really across geographies as well. So that being said, I think it's something that the newer generation can easily plug into. But I think that folks that have been maybe using certain types of technology for a while, it can be more challenging. Something that I know we've talked about before is the curriculum isn't changing, right? The learning material is the same. It's the delivery method that changes as technology changes. And so when overhead projectors were made available, instructors had to learn how to use them. Same thing with tablets. And now we've got XR technology. I know this is something that you're spending a lot of time with, is how to onboard those instructors and those subject matter experts and flatten the learning curve. It may be no code content authoring, but if they've never been in a VR headset before or an XR headset before, there is still a learning curve. For our audience, can you speak to maybe some of the things that you found as being the most successful, or kind of methodologies or approaches that have been able to flatten that learning curve?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me at my base, I have actually, I've been working on it myself, and it's something that I've done. I was against VR. I had no technological means to actually learn how to do it. I didn't want to, but when I did, since I've been through this, it makes it a lot easier for me to teach it to others. I know what pitfalls they're going to have. I know where they're going to try and get used to different types of controllers and different types of headsets, and being able in VR, not being able to see your direct surroundings versus XR being able to see your direct surroundings. It's different for every single person. And just as I said, the students, they learn very quickly. I show them buttons and they pick it up. They're good to go. My instructors, this is where I have actually deployed my own team. So I have leveraged my technologically advanced crew chiefs that I have in my squadron. And we've created a team to go out and actually teach everyone else how to get into the VR, how to start it up, how to move around, how to get it set up, how to do these self-authoring tools. So we've gone through the process multiple times, and we've kind of narrowed it down to a certain way to do it. But the familiarization, it's just like anything else. You kind of have to just get in and do it. And it's just getting them to have that buy-in to want to do it. That's the biggest part of it. Once you get someone having that buy-in, they're ready to go. And once you get them in the headset the first time, once they see all of this content, it's unbelievable what they think, and especially seeing it in such a clear headset as well. I did want to really quick touch on the self-authoring point. This really allows us as the subject matter experts. I'm a crew chief. I don't want someone to build my training for me. I want someone to build me an environment, and then I get to teach my students how to do that. And that's exactly what HTX and the team here that we have with Unreal and Varjo are allowing us to do. They are building us this, aircraft, the C-130, for example, and then I get to go in and I do the recordings. I get to share my experiences with my airmen. So it's a really powerful tool. It allows us to pinpoint everything that we need with these airmen. So I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
I just wanted to add real briefly here, because I neglected to, during the expertise capture process or the recording process, where you've got a subject matter expert in the headset, what that turns into on the student's end is the opportunity to progress through that from different learning modes. So students, what we're seeing here in the video is a student in watch mode, seeing it from a third person perspective. So you can see the instructor's avatar, hear their voice. If you have no idea what you're doing, it's probably a good place to start. But then you can progress into a first person learning mode where you essentially embody that instructor's avatar, and you are then guided through the procedure or the task or whatever it is. And then there's a final learning mode that kind of takes the training wheels off, and you're ultimately assessed against that instructor's lesson in terms of the scoring rubric that was codified as really a side effect of them creating that lesson. One of my favorites, which is something that we call immersive academics. In other words, what we do to typically boring, dry, dull subject matter, within the Shepherd curriculum, this is understanding aircraft systems, like here in the video, we're looking at like flight control systems, so all the mechanical systems and the pulleys and cables and how they interact with the different flight control surfaces, like the elevators and the rudder and ailerons and whatnot. So students, and Sergeant Ingram can speak to this a lot better than I can, but the students, typically the way that they would learn this is through schematics and eventually getting out to the plane itself. But with VR, with XR, we can give students superpowers. In real life, you can't see through the skin of the airplane, but in this case, you can. And so instructors can then use this as part of that content authoring approach, right? This is intelligence that is baked into that digital classroom that instructors now you're seeing an example here of an instructor creating a lesson specific to the flight control system on a C-130. And then that lesson is then deployed to students and they can learn from that. You can isolate different types of systems, but I think, Sergeant Ingram, the thing that I always kind of end up on with this from a student perspective is this is a whole lot more fun than staring at a schematic or reading through a textbook or going through a PowerPoint. And I think, for the audience here, can you talk to student reaction to this and maybe some of the benefits that you've already been able to see based on experiences that students have been able to kind of quantify for you?
Absolutely. So first thing I'll just talk about is how much easier it is to teach in this versus the real world in the portion where we have tight spaces. So on the C-130, if I want to talk about a certain point on the flight controls here, I have a class of 10, 12, 16, 18 students, and I can only show that one student, a portion of the aircraft at one time. But with this, all the students can see it all at the same time, turning the aircraft completely invisible. As you see here on the screen, they can see every different component. We don't have to remove anything to see the locations and what those parts look like. So it really brings in those superpowers, that Ironman effect, the exploding parts, our brake, it breaks into a whole bunch of different portions. But yeah, the students' reactions when they get inside here and they see the C-130, it's that initial awe. It's awesome. There's a C-130 right there in front of them, and they get to walk around, they get to walk into it, they get to react with different or interact with different types of switches and dials and screens and circuit breakers and hydraulics and fuels and all these different things that we have that we work on. And then you show them that they can turn all those systems on and then turn the aircraft invisible, like you see right here, and their mouths just drop. They get to see all of this, and it's built just like a C-130 is actually and truly built. This allows us as the instructors to teach locations, procedures, and the sizes and what the components look like, the colors of the components, where they're located. And the students love this because now they're learning, they're building confidence because they know where these parts are. They know where to find these things. They know how to get to those things. And it's very difficult to teach that on a piece of paper. So it's building that confidence, and in turn, that confidence of them seeing all of this stuff ahead of time, it builds their competency as well. And that's something that the Air Force is going towards, is trying to get our students that get to the flight line more competent in their jobs. So it's been super helpful. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that this was touched on. You touched on this earlier, Sergeant Ingram. We can dig into it more here. So I think this is an awesome example of how virtual reality training can be much more effective. And sorry for for some who might be eating breakfast with the image there. As human beings, I think most of us, I can speak for myself certainly, we learn best through failure. The difference is when we're talking about a very high consequence environment, like you might find on the flight line or Sergeant Ingram's world, failure can mean injury or worse. It can also mean that you just damaged something that costs a lot of money, and that can be a bad career day. So being able to make mistakes for free is another kind of superpower, I think, with immersive tech, but not just make them free for free where you don't get hurt, you don't break something, but also you can see the ramifications. Like you see, they're getting sprayed in the face with hydraulic fluid. You can see the ramifications of that mistake, and from a student perspective, hopefully understand, okay, that's why I wear safety glasses, or PPE gear. That's why I need to do this or that. And I think, Sergeant Ingram, from an instructor perspective, like safety is like everything in terms of preparedness, right? In terms of creating a prepared and competent airman that's ready to move on out of the schoolhouse. Can you talk about what does this give you from an instructor perspective and the other instructors there as a way to let students really understand what kind of environment they're going to be operating out of?
Absolutely. So for any company ever, I mean, I'm going to talk specifically to the Air Force here, but for any company ever, our most precious resource is our people. And we know that if something happens safety related to our people, that we lose a vital asset to any of our companies. And us, as in the Air Force, unfortunately, we do see stuff like this happen. And I'm not going to say it's for any other reason but stuff happens. So we in the Air Force, we want to be able to show the students that you can fail, but it's not the end of the world. And this allows us to do that. This allows those students to see that big red button that says do not push, and they get to push it to see what actually happens. And I mean, everyone has that curiosity. I've had that curiosity. You see something that says don't do it, and you want to do it. You want to be able to do it. You want to know what happens when it does that. And this allows you to do that. So now the students can do that, make that mistake, fail safely, as we were talking about earlier. And now they know exactly what happens, so they know what not to do. And just as Chris was saying, everybody learns from their mistakes. And if we can never make mistakes, we don't know what happens when that mistake may happen. We might think we know, but we probably don't actually know. So these different things that you see here, it allows us to fail safely, and it really, really helps for the students to understand what needs to happen and why it happens like that. There's a whole lot worse than just getting sprayed in the face like this. If that hydraulic fluid happens to be hot, you're going to have internal burns from the fluid. It's not pretty to see. And just another thing that also helps is when you fail safely, it also saves us money. So in the Air Force, when we take our students out to the flight line and they break a part because they're not familiar with that procedure yet, we have to pay to have that part fixed. So they may have failed in that portion, but this allows us to fail. So say I'm changing a filter, a hydraulic filter, and I strip the threads. I have to get a whole new filter. Those filters are not cheap for aircraft. So every time that you have a student go through that, 18, 20 students in every single class, and we're pushing hundreds of classes every year, it allows us to save a lot of money because they know how to put that filter on. They know what to look for. So, all right, I'll pass it right back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sergeant Ingram. So not the last slide, but the last kind of in this set speaks to multimodal learning. And really what this is getting at is the future proofing of, in this case, the investment that the Air Force is making in immersive learning. So as Sergeant Ingram, you and your team build and create more lessons and deploy those, you want to make sure that those lessons are going to continue to work as newer and better hardware options come out. And I think this is a great example in the video that we're seeing here, because the C-130 that we're seeing, the virtual C-130 that we're seeing there, is being deployed into an actual hangar, which was really cool to do. And so, once you had access to XR3 headsets, you were able to take the same immersive environments and pull those directly into an XR, or really a mixed reality situation, which has its own advantages of being able to be in your place with your people. I think one of the big advantages here, and you spoke to this earlier, is like you can see the gentleman there. You can see your instructor while also interacting with the virtual objects. I think that this gives customers a lot of options, and I think it hopefully gives customers kind of that peace of mind that the investment they're making isn't going to suddenly stop working. I know you've already spoken, Sergeant Ingram, a bit about kind of the XR3 and kind of the fidelity and the realism, but I think there was another story in there that you maybe haven't told, just in terms of some of the reaction that you've gotten from this headset, and as it's gained kind of more traction and more folks have been able to kind of experience it.
Yep, absolutely. So as you can see here, you can see your instructor while you're working on the aircraft, and there's not very many headsets that can do this right now. But we've used all different kinds of headsets, and we probably have 5 different kinds that we're using throughout our training right now. And I was just recently at like a symposium, and we had people come in looking at our training and talking about it back and forth. There was a lot of connections going on, and I had a pretty high individual come up to me and they wanted to see the training. So I had started talking about the training. I showed them a few things, and this individual then they asked if they could put it on and see it for themselves. And I said, absolutely. So the first headset that I went to was the Varjo XR3, and they saw it. They liked that one best, the way it looked. So I went ahead, put the headset on the individual, and they started walking around, and they said, whoa, this is really incredible. It's super clear. I can read the words. Everything looks realistic. And they say it's the human eye resolution, and I truly believe it. I truly believe it after being in this headset. So the individual walked around a little bit, started seeing some of this stuff in the C-130, and then jumped out, and I had, all my different headsets there. And going through all those different headsets, I had different environments in each one. So they asked if they could see the different environments. So I put them on a different headset, and all that happened was the individual put the headset on. There was about 3 seconds, and they just said, nope. And they took the headset off and sat it down on the table and said, I like the other one better. And they didn't even want to interact into the environment because they couldn't even read the menu in front of them. It made it more difficult. And I can tell you from experience, from coming from an XR3 or any of the Varjo products that I've used to some other headsets, it does make it very difficult. You really do notice the clarity in the Varjo headsets. It's unbelievable. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so this is really a look at where it's going. We kind of set a backdrop that with Shepherd and what's been done there was an initial push that was called, at least internally, Crew Chief Fundamentals 2.0. And like the slide says, it kind of served as a baseline for XR training. Within the Air Force, it got noticed quite a bit. And something that we've seen is that I definitely have seen is that Shepherd within the Air Force has been seen as sort of a model, kind of like that's the right way to do it. And it's gotten a lot of attention, especially as different publications have picked it up and the story has gotten out there. And that's been great because just like innovation anywhere, it's often siloed and there's lots of duplication of efforts and everybody trying to do sort of the same thing, but a little bit differently. And that's something that we've seen and we've been really proud of is working with the team, with Sergeant Ingram's team, is that I think a lot of folks are looking at this and saying, okay, yeah, they've gotten past proof of concept and prototype, and they're actually moving on to something that's starting to resemble scalable and sustainable, which is really what you need. So that kind of paved the way for what we're continuing to work on right now with Crew Chief Fundamentals 3.0, which from my perspective, and then love for you to build on this, Sergeant Ingram, this is really about not just operationalizing it, but really scaling this across the Air Force, and trying to eliminate some of that duplication of effort and show folks that this is a tried and true kind of methodology for making it work, and here's the data to back it up. But it's also the United States Air Force, and so there is bureaucracy, there are layers that we have to get through, and most of that's well above my pay grade. But I think that what you and your team are doing is it's definitely making progress, and without maybe getting into a ton of kind of the intricacies of kind of US Air Force stuff, maybe if you can speak to the audience about kind of what process you're going through. And I think also folks are going to be interested, like in the 46% there on the graphic, kind of what you saw coming out of 2.0 and kind of what we have to look forward to with 3.0.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the Crew Chief 2.0 stuff here. So when we had the initial 2.0 come through, or the initial thing that happened in 2020, we took a control group, and those individuals went through the traditional way. So they had their books, they had their instructor, they were in a traditional classroom getting taught the traditional way. Everything was in a controlled area, making sure that students were going through the exact different type or the exact same type of training that we do right now, that we teach and have been doing for ages. And then we had a couple classes go through the VR portion of that course. And the interesting results here was that just as you see there, that 46%, we were able to achieve the same results in test-wise, but we were doing it at a 46% drop in time. Now, it's not that we're trying to teach them faster. That's not the goal. We are not trying to teach them faster. It's just that the students were more engaged, they were self-paced, and they wanted to learn this. So they themselves took it upon themselves to learn this information. They liked learning this information, and they wanted to learn this information. So that course went from 23 days down to like 13 days. And that was the average time. There were some that did it faster and there were some that did it slower. That's the woes of having a self-paced course, is you got, different people go through it at different times. But it showed that a complete VR course was beneficial. It saves time and you get the same product. So now what we're doing is we're trying to build that by getting the SMEs involved and teaching every single thing that we saw in that proof of concept that wasn't hitting the mark right where we wanted it to be. It's not that it didn't hit the mark, because it definitely hit the mark. It definitely showed that way, but we're trying to increase it. Now the Air Force is wanting that competency in all of these different areas. And that's something that we're going to start, that we're working on right now. With the scaling of this, obviously I have mentioned it before, you got your headsets, you've got your tablets and your phones and your laptops, whatever else you want to use, you can use it in this training. But it's also beyond that. It's that we also have age equipment in here, which is aerospace ground equipment that we as crew chiefs use. And HTX has built this using the Unreal Engine, and we're able to use it using the Varjo headsets. We get to pass that off to age. Now, the age schoolhouse, the aerospace ground equipment schoolhouse, can now utilize that for themselves. So now we've got two birds and one stone, all in the same environment. Getting it online, that is something that we are working through. We're working with our internal base units, making sure that we're doing it the right way. We're not just going rogue. We're not just getting our own Wi-Fi and just giving students tablets and making sure that they have the training. We want to make sure that we're doing everything the right way, following all the right procedures, all the right policies. We might have to rewrite policies or try and, modify them in a way that we can get this training out. We're making sure that we're delivering the same exact content, but it's in a different delivery method. So that's the biggest thing here. 46% off your course is quite a lot, even though that was only a byproduct. So I'll pass it back to you, Chris. I know we need to keep going.
Yeah, I think we're probably bumping up against it and want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions. What I'll just conclude with and try to come full circle from what Sebastian opened up with, in terms of return on experience or RETEX, I believe we've seen a really great model for that at Shepherd Air Force Base. And what we're doing right now from an HTX perspective is we are working with Sergeant Ingram and his team and with others in the Air Force to take this much more broadly, so that we aren't seeing all that duplication of effort time and time again. So for us, that means we're on a path to what's called a program of record within the Air Force, which in many ways you could look at that as kind of an enterprise type license, where it's going to democratize access to XR training for students, but also democratize access to the content creation as well. And I would say caveat there is not as much as democratizing for students, because you don't want just anybody to be able to create the training. It's got to be in the right silos and the right places. And so it's getting these tools into the hands of the folks who do have the expertise, who are in charge of the curriculum, and teaching them on how to use this new delivery model. right? Going back to what we talked about earlier with the progression of, the never-ending progression of technology. This is just another type of technology that folks that maybe yesterday were building CVTs tomorrow need to understand how to do this with immersive tech. I think with that, Jeff, I know we're probably getting close, so I might punt back to you for the Q&A here.
Sure. I mean, we might not have time for that many. One thing I can put out there is that we can reach out to everybody afterwards as well. If you've asked your question non-anonymously, we can reach back out to you, and we'll also have contact for everybody on this call. But we do have one question that I think is a good practical question that I think we have a good practical answer for, which is basically, is there a good workflow for importing data? So like if we have the model of the C-130, how does that make its way into the training? And I'm wondering, Chris, if you might be able to answer that.
So definitely can go into a long answer on this, but the short answer given the time is we have a number of ways that we can ingest, and this is also something that allows us to build on a lot of the value of Unreal, but we can ingest different types of 3D models. The trick with for VR, XR is optimizing those to make sure that we're going to get the right frames per second in the wearable. Back on that slide, that one of the ones I opened with, I said that we have a low-code content authoring solution. It's called IMPACT Developer. That's what we use. We dog food everything, eat our own dog food if you're familiar with the reference, but also others use that as well to build the intelligence into those environments. And so that is a huge accelerator for us because we're able to take, in this case, a C-130 that originally was laser scanned point cloud data, turned into a 3D model, optimized, and then we've injected it with a lot of intelligence so that you can simulate systems and do procedural tasks like change the wheel and tire or service the shock strut. That was all done on top of IMPACT Developer, which is built on the Unreal Engine. Happy to go into more detail if we want to take some of that offline.
Yeah, that might be fodder for another webinar on another day as we dig into how to use data interactively. But one thing, just to put a button on it, is there is always a good path, thanks to Seb and the folks at Unreal and other tools as well. I think with that, I think we'll put an end to it. I'd really like to thank everybody for showing up. We had some really great questions and really good engagement, and thanks so much for all the compliments in the Q&A. Seb, thank you so much for being here. And of course, Chris and Kyle, Sergeant Ingram especially, for sharing with us your experience. I really appreciate it. And yeah, hope to follow up with everybody after the session.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here.